Thank you. I'd like to start specifically by thanking Michaela Koller and Andreas Brandstätter for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all today. It's a real privilege to be here and a privilege to be able to do so. I'd also like to start with a warning that, much as the title of my talk suggests, what I have to say is not going to be very pretty. And I'd also like to start just by being straight and honest about the situation we're currently in, by saying that we're confronted at the moment with nothing short of a monumental crisis of impending species loss on the one hand and climate chaos on the other hand, of really unprecedented scale. I would say this is quite fast becoming the biggest challenge that we as humanity have ever faced. Today, and we saw a report coming out just a few weeks ago, 1 million species of plants and animals are at risk of going extinct. And to be quite clear, if they go extinct, ladies and gentlemen, so do we. That's the one side. The other side is that we're really going to struggle. We're going to have a fight on our hands to stay alive in a world that has warmed by 3 or 4 degrees C. And that's the world that we're currently headed for. Now, Andreas Brandstätter spoke quite a lot about natural catastrophes. Obviously, that's something I'd also like to speak about in the context of the climate crisis. So every year, the typhoons that hit East Asia get more intense. Every year, the hurricanes that hit the Caribbean and the US get stronger. When we talk about small island states, we talk about countries that are literally at risk of drowning, and huge swaths of sub-Saharan Africa today are at risk of becoming uninhabitable. But it's not just these parts of the world. I think the intense heat wave, the massive drought, excuse me, and the deadly wildfires that we experienced in Europe last year show that the climate crisis has also arrived here. And what we experienced last summer, by the way, was a walk in the park with what's to come. And now when we look at climate science, which is getting ever more precise, we know that the heat wave that we experienced in Northern Europe last year was made more than twice as likely by global warming. The intensity of Hurricane Harvey was made 3 times more likely by global warming. Lucifer, that's the name of the intense heat wave in the Mediterranean in 2017, was made 10 times more likely by global warming. And the incredible heat in southern Australia in 2016 was made 50 times more likely by global warming. That's the results of modeling done by the University of Oxford and others in quite a new science known as weather attribution. And as such, when we take those probabilities, it's no real surprise to see, for example, Insurance Australia Group executive Jackie Johnson say that the world we're currently creating will be pretty much uninsurable. Or, and I'm going to come up with a few quotes here, the chairman of AXA says, okay, a world of 2 degrees C might be insurable, a world of 4 degrees C will definitely not be an insurable world. Exactly the same coming from Swiss Re. These risks, if they continue to be unmitigated, may become uninsurable in the future. And Aviva, already in 2015, in their strategic response to climate change, saying that the climate crisis will render significant proportions of the economy uninsurable. And I think the second half of that sentence is also rather relevant. That is going to significantly shrink the addressable market for the insurance industry and obviously all other industries. Now, I'm going to assume that Munich Re figures aren't news to anyone here in the room, that the 2015 hurricane season cost $215 billion in damages, and that losses from natural catastrophes, which obviously become more frequent and become more intense with global warming, totaled $330 billion. Andreas mentioned in his opening speech that less than half of those losses were in fact insured in the year 2017. A figure that may be news to you is this one. The emissions we as a global society caused in 2017 will carry future costs of up to $16 trillion. That's more than 1/5 of global GDP in the same year. And That's a figure that isn't coming from Greenpeace, that isn't coming from some left-wing think tank. That's a figure published in Nature just a few months ago. But this story is more about just facts and figures. This story is obviously about the people and the people who suffer the consequences. And I'd like to speak briefly about a good friend of mine and a colleague of mine, Joanna from the Philippines. Now, Joanna, a few years ago, lost her entire family in Super Typhoon Haiyan. Joanna held her mother in her arms in the storm surge of this typhoon, only to realize moments later that her mother was already dead. And Joanna was faced with the choice of letting her mother's lifeless body go and to grab onto something for dear life, or to die herself. And Joanna, who since then has been active and is holding fossil fuel companies across the world accountable for their role in this crisis. Now, I want to talk specifically today about coal for a number of reasons. A, because coal is the biggest climate killer with around 46% of global CO2 emissions. Coal causes over 800,000 premature deaths every year, and in the EU alone is responsible for about 56 billion euros of health costs. Now, the agreement I made with Andreas and Michaela before coming here today was not to name individual insurance companies, and I firmly intend to stick to that promise. I am, however, going to name individual coal companies, because I think it's important to know who we're talking about here. Companies such as RWE in Germany. This company is the single biggest polluter in the EU, and is, by the way, one of the companies that Joanna is currently holding accountable in the courts. Or ČEZ in the Czech Republic, who many of you also insure. Or PGE in Poland, which amongst other things operate this power plant here, Bełchatów. Now, Bełchatów alone emits 30 million tons of CO2 every year. That is more than the entire country of Denmark. So, to be actually quite straight and honest, these companies are the most irresponsible companies in the world. They cause thousands of premature deaths every year, and they are exacerbating the climate crisis which we are all dealing with. But, and I think this much honesty is necessary, they're also your clients. You do business with one of the most irresponsible companies and industries in the world, and an industry that undermines more or less everything else you do. We've been talking this morning about your primary business models. You insure people's property, you insure their health, you insure their lives, and you insure an industry that destroys all three. Now, I'm sorry for sounding harsh, but it's the truth. Now, we've been fighting these companies for years. Greenpeace fights them where they mine their coal, where they burn their coal, outside their boardrooms, inside their AGM meeting halls, and increasingly we're also taking these battles to the courts, fighting them, or it must be said, the irresponsible governments whose failure to regulate the coal industry has created a significant part of this mess. And I would say now it's time for you as an industry, and not as any old industry, but maybe as the industry that's going to be impacted by the climate crisis like no other industry, to make it absolutely crystal clear to these companies that you're no longer willing to do business with them unless they are willing to change. I would say it's time for the insurance industry in that sense to act with integrity, but specifically to act consistently with the image of providing valuable services for people, which is what you do. If we take the climate crisis seriously and we act in line with science, that means reducing global emissions by 50% in 11 years. And in turn, what that means is that we need to have phased out coal in Europe and in OECD countries by 2030. And to put that another way, that means limiting global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. That, in turn, means leaving 82% of coal reserves, 50% of oil reserves, and 33% of gas reserves in the ground forever. That's going to massively have a massive financial impact on the value of fossil fuel companies, which obviously in turn is going to have an impact on anyone who is invested in those companies. And I don't think I need to tell all of you whose business model demands a long-term, low-risk and conservative investment strategy that it's simply a risk to be invested in companies like these with their current business model. So So to put it plain and simple, from the perspective of Greenpeace, there's no other way about it than just to say you need to ditch coal. We're not saying from today this needs to happen tomorrow, but in the next few years this needs to happen. You need to divest your holdings from coal, you need to stop insuring coal mines and coal power plants, and you need to engage with existing customers, making it absolutely crystal clear to them that you're not willing to renew their contracts unless they're willing to change, which means phasing out coal. At the end of the day, and I think I made that point earlier, staying invested in the coal industry, but in fossil fuels generally, will cost you money in the long run. On the other hand, committing to get out of coal is going to leave you with a significantly better public image. And again, I'm not going to name any names, but many of you in this room have already started acting on these demands. And as such, you are also leaders in the industry in Europe. But this is about so much more than just cleaning up Europe. I mean, I've seen on the guest list there's colleagues, representatives from the US and from Asia here, and this is what this is all about. This is not about just cleaning up Europe. This is about leading by example as an industry globally and taking these policies which are developing in Europe and spreading these policies to countries like China, Japan, and Indonesia. I've talked now specifically about coal because that's where the biggest urgency lies from the climate perspective. But I might just as well have talked about oil or talked about gas. At the end of the day, any new fossil fuel infrastructure projects we build today, we build them on the assumption, in fact, we build them on the economic premise that they will be operational in 2045, 2050 and beyond. And that is something we just cannot allow to happen. I'd like to just finish by saying that phasing out coal by 2030 in Europe and in OECD countries is not a question of technological or economic feasibility. It's merely a question of corporate and political will. And the reason I came here today was to appeal to you, in fact, to demand from you all to do your bit. And to go, as the title of my talk suggested, from inconsistency to consistency with everything else you do, and in fact to go from acting with a certain degree of hypocrisy to acting with integrity. And I'd like to thank you very much for taking your valuable time in the conference today to listen to me. Thanks a lot.